Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Common Law Court of Wales radio show. We have a special guest from Wales, funny enough. He's ex-RAF. He's been working on the corruption within the City of London for many years now, and has done a forensic job, basically, in breaking down the corruption that runs through politics, into banking, and all over the private side. So we're very lucky this evening to have Gorden Bowden with us. Gorden, can you hear me?
100%, Darren, 100%.
How are you this evening, sir?
I've got a bit of a cold, but that won't put me off.
Right, you know that. So, well, we got a big subject, but we got plenty of time to do it. City of London, where would you like to start us off?
Well, Finchley Road, if you want to go straight to the heart.
Well, yes, if you like, but I mean, the City of London isn't quite a city, is it? It is a corporation in itself.
That's correct. That's correct. You're well up on the information-wise.
Yeah. Just for the listeners, then I'll just do a brief outline now. The subject matter that Gorden and I are going to get into this evening is primarily about the City of London, which most people think would be part of the UK, but in actual fact it isn't. It's a corporate fiction, and it is basically built on fraud, money laundering and extortion. Gorden has a magnificent case that encapsulates all of the above, and that's what we're going to get into. But yeah, if you want to start off in Finchley, Gorden, we'll take it from there and crack on, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I basically, in 2001, with the two attorneys of law forensic money trail, followed a fraud to which my partner was one of over 800 victims when I just got together with her. And the forensic money trail, where the two attorneys, they followed it through Austria and then back to the City of London, where they received virtually no assistance from the Serious Fraud Office or the Metropolitan Police. They were sort of given the spoof where they say, under the mutual treaty agreement, if the South African police want any information, they will assist them under that treaty.
Yes.
However, there was no sort of taking up the case that London was the conduit for moving millions, hundreds of millions, in this particular fraud.
Right, Gorden, the particular fraud, just for the listeners, could you give them an outline of exactly what sparked you off on this, the circumstances? I believe it was your daughter got robbed, is that correct?
No. It was my the new lady in my life.
Okay, yes.
She had lost her husband with cancer.
Yes.
I was divorced, and what she had done was she took the advice of a long family insurance broker, who came across this by way of two of his ex-employees who were in Cape Town.
I see. And
it was a capital venture investment, and this insurance broker, his name was Fred Stradham, he got hold of all his clientele, said, "This is magnificent, it's a 3-month short-term investment, and after 3 months you'll get 30% return." That's what he told my partner. Anyway, to cut a long story short, 1 month after the payout should have progressed, there was still no joy on the return of her investment, which was $50,000. And another gentleman under the same broker invested $52,000 US. So there were two people in the same city that invested a total of $102,000 US. And then I took my partner, after she showed me the investment documents. I understood straight away, with my ability to dismantle a document. It was quite a complex document. However, all she had for contact was a mobile phone number. And what I did was I checked, and it was actually a satellite phone number, not a normal mobile phone.
I imagine the alarm bells would have been ringing at that point for you, Gorden.
Well, yeah, it did, Darren. And I said, with my military training, I understood when you're dealing with people that use sat phones, these are not normal people. And so I took her to see an investment broker within the bank, who then checked some of the paperwork and used the telephone number, the mobile phone number, the sat phone number, and contacted the piece of rubbish, who was part of a syndicate who had defrauded over 800 people, to our knowledge. And within 2 or 3 minutes, while my partner had gone to the toilet, he looked at me and he said, her money's gone. And I said, yeah, I thought that. That's why I brought her to you, just to let her know. And then we went and we started the attempt at a civil recovery using 2 attorneys at law who travelled extensively throughout Europe and London to conduct and compile a full forensic money trail, which was excellent. They did a brilliant job.
Right.
And then after umming and ahhing the people that we contacted, we could see that it was going to get nowhere. They were all saying, he's got the money, and so we took the full set of dossiers to the Scorpions, who were the leading South African anti-corruption and fraud police in South Africa. They were a separate unit from the police. They were supposed to be the best.
I see.
And then we handed it over to them, and then I started my own investigations using my own ability to recover documents, and that's where I got alarmed with the names of the people who were the main suspects.
Right, and we're not talking small change here, Gordon. It's a hell of a lot amount. It's a hell of a lot amount of money, isn't it? I mean, how many victims again did you say?
There were over 800 victims. There were the Blue Bulls rugby team in South Africa. There were plenty of small businesses that all collapsed, put plenty of people out of work. So when you talk about how it affects in a domino effect, members of a family, I was told that 2 people committed suicide. An old lady who hung herself in a kitchen, and another farmer who shot himself with a 12-bore. And that's how it affects people when they lose everything, because these people had mortgaged their properties, little farm holding, the one guy, the farmer. And then I sort of said, I'll make it my duty. I'll try and get justice for these people. And that's when I started. And it's been a long trail, but as I've gone through for the last sort of 6 years, I've understood a lot more than most people would on billion-pound organised crime. Not in Africa, but here in the city of London.
Well, indeed, and it's been called by other financial investigators. It's the capital of fraud, this place, Gordon. There's no getting away from it. I mean, this LIBOR case, I mean, they do the precious metal fixing and all these things within the city of London. It's a huge industry, and it is primarily based on predators. These private bankers, they are psychopaths. They got no real morals or ties to any country or person. They just there. Money is their god, and they'll just about do anything to do with it to get it. Now, I mean, so you picked this trail up. Where did it lead you, Gordon?
Well, I used the attorney's dossiers, which we had copies of, and then I started recovering documents on the individual suspects. And alarm bells started for me as an ex-forces person, was because the one instigator of the fraud, his name was Chris Dutoy. I found out by doing what they call an ITC search, which was the recovery of his employment history and his properties and his company history. And I found out that this gentleman was a senior ex-High Commission diplomatic intelligence officer. And then the witness that signed the fraud document was actually a guy called Hannes Venter. And this guy, I found out, he was an ex-colonel in the military intelligence service of the apartheid government.
Right.
And so, when you're dealing with people like this, you're dealing with people who had a reputation of not only mass murder, but any sort of covert black ops involving Angola, Chad, Nigeria, It doesn't matter where they went. These people, they were the scum of the earth. And so that's where I started. Then it led to the accountant, and his name was Douw van der Merwe Viljoen, and I found out that he was the relative of Constant Viljoen of the apartheid government.
Right.
And then I found out that Chris du Toit was related to Nick du Toit, who was part of the Equatorial Guinea coup with Simon Mann, if you remember that.
Well, I see.
When Sir Mark Thatcher was arrested in South Africa later on. That was after I found out certain information.
So what you're describing here is a clique that spans at the very highest levels of authority, really, Gordon, isn't it? I mean,
and the intelligence services, not just in South Africa, they were the cohorts of the Conservative Party. They were working incognito with Executive Outcomes, Sandline International, Plaza 107 Limited, the Palace Group. These were all part of the covert black ops that used to do the mineral theft rings in Africa,
right.
and the blood diamond dealing, and the covert supplying of arms into Angola, Robert Mugabe, all the scumbags, all the corrupt idiots that run these despot states.
Yeah.
Anywhere where there was anything of value, they would use these with complicit agreement of certain members of the government, our government,
yeah.
our righteous people with integrity and honour, would use those people to substructure fake oil, gas and mining companies, where they could then use those companies for bunging money to corrupt politicians. And so it goes on.
Indeed.
But
I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with a whistleblower and writer by the name of John Perkins. He wrote a book, I believe it was in 2012, Diaries of an Economic Hitman, and his job would be to go into these countries and basically force IMF loans for things that they didn't need, you know, these fictitious mines and all that.
That's right.
Stuff. So yes, just to back up what Gordon's saying there, there is other whistleblowers and researchers who have come out and are speaking exactly of what Gordon is talking about this evening. So I urge the listeners to do a bit of research in this field, because it's quite extraordinary, the link between the so-called legit governments and how these money men, these people who control the currencies, are involved in the most heinous crimes. Please continue, Gordon.
yeah, well, as I started to, this was going from about 2003. In 2004, I recovered some documents on one of the scumbags who was working with the accountant, and his name was Nico Sheffer, and he was a convicted bank robber and fake mining company director, and he was working with the accountant, Douw van der Merwe Viljoen, Chris du Toit, Hannes Venter, and the money mules who moved my partners and the other victims' money to Channel Islands accounts, and then transferred that to a backstreet bureau de change, where they were party to the cash handover of the victims, some of the cash. The money was then put back into what they call a bounce company structured in South Africa. So what they did was they in order to put slamming doors in front of any investigation, they cashed out a lot of the money in various currencies, and then fed it back into accounts of nearly identical named companies, but in South Africa, not registered in London as the two main companies were, but that enabled them under the Forex rules to move cash.
I see.
Out of one country to another, because it was going to like a subsidiary company.
Yeah, so
and that's how they set it up, and that's what I uncovered.
So basically we got a very sophisticated money laundering scheme.
No, very simple. It's very simple. Once you understand the modus operandi, once you see how simple it is,
yes,
and you can then follow the individuals and find out, shit, they've done it, excuse my French,
That's okay,
they've done it time and time again.
Right.
And that's what I found out. I said, these people, they're extracting the urine. They've been doing this multiple times and nobody stopped them. One, because they've held high positions within a military apartheid government, and also they were working with complicit people in the City of London who were, what I found out, were ex-SAS commanders.
There we go. So
these are the people we hold with the highest honours for being the highest trained soldiers in the British military, and they were the highest commanders that were working with real evil people, and that's their security backing. Do you understand?
absolutely, and I mean, I can't help but think the comparisons between that and what the CIA do with the drug running and whatnot. You know, I mean,
Exactly.
It's almost, you know, for anyone who would like to check out the Contra affair and whatnot. I mean, it sounds very similar, Gordon.
Well, it is similar because it's the same people. That's what I found out.
Right.
Yeah, because if you have a look at anything about George Bush,
Yes.
he operated an oil company called Zapata,
And of course, he was the head of the CIA.
and the operation was Operation Zapata, the Bay of Pigs.
There we go.
So, unless you say...
And just for the listeners, Bush Senior was the head of the CIA, by the way. So there's your there's another connection there.
Well, not only that, they were two advisors that started a company in the States called Barrick Gold Corporation. Barrick Gold Corporation. And Barrick Gold Corporation was set up by the Bushes and a guy called Mohammed Adnan Khashoggi.
Okay.
Do you know that name?
No, I can't say
Well,
I
he
do,
was-
Gordon.
It
It sounds familiar, but
Well,
I
it
can't.
should do, because his cousin was Mohammed Al Fayed,
Right.
and that brings in Dodi and Diana,
Now then, this is it.
which brings you to another. I don't want to go down the conspiracy route, but I've got my own opinion on this
Well, I mean,
because of landmines and what Khashoggi was selling.
right.
And if she found out, which I'm sure she did know,
Mhm.
if anybody's seen if you look on the internet,
Yeah.
you can see Diana working in Angola in a minefield,
That's
which
right.
has been previously cleared. And she's wearing a full head protection gear with a clear visor, and she's got a tabard on. And on that tabard is called the Hallow Trust. And that Hallow Trust, one of the senior directors was a guy called Brigadier Aldwin James Glendining Wright. And he was one of the scumbags working with another SAS commander called Mark Blackburn, who both of them spelt their names slightly wrong to open different companies, which I found out and documented and challenged the police authorities that they were doing nothing because, one, Mark Blackburn was the senior advisor for the Ministry of Defence in SAS operations.
And I mean, and not only that, didn't two SAS men come out and said they had something to do with the Diana murder recently? When I say recently, I believe it was sometime last year.
Well, this is what I'm saying, is that when you understand how to dismantle a company using the forensic Companies House documents, you can lay them out until you can see the big picture.
Right.
When you're looking at one specific document, it means nothing. There are names and companies that mean nothing. However, when you do a spider web of all the companies and the directors and lay them out on a big table, what you can see is when you start pinning different coloured threads, it goes beyond coincidence that these people are all interconnected, either by common directorships of the same companies at the same time, who then operate what they call revolving doors into other companies where they move around. And this is how they do corporate espionage and asset stripping of billions of pounds of massive corporations. But when you have people like Blackburn and Wright, Aldwyn James Glendining right, you're talking about the creme de la creme of Her Majesty's Special Air Service.
Indeed.
But what I found out is when you recover the documents, that not only that, they were also working with Lonro. Have you heard of Lonro?
No.
Which is Tiny Rollins. And he was a German who started up this African substructures where they controlled the mining in Africa and all the hotels and all the tobacco companies. It was just a mass conglomerate of hundreds of little tiny companies all under the Lonro umbrella, and that's where Mohammed Adnan Khashoggi came in, Mohammed Al Fayed, and some real big conservatives.
Right.
So this is where we talk about how come Africa is so rich in mineral wealth, and yet we'll get adverts on Sky and Virgin, send £2 a month for little Seasway, he's drinking mosquito-laden water, you know.
Yeah.
They show these heart-rending photographs. Trust me, I lived in Africa for 20 odd years. The realities of what these people, it's mainly a scam, this adverts that they're putting on there. Yes, maybe they'll make a big video of somebody going there and putting a water pump in, but trust me, I lived in Africa for 20 odd years. I travelled much of Africa. It's a load of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean,
it's money. It's money. That's what they're after, is money. They're not interested in saving little Seasway. It's comic relief, is just the same.
Oh, provable fact. Geldof and Live Aid. I mean, that other one, what's that other idiot? Bono. I mean, these boys are working directly for the Queen and the likes of Bill Gates. All the money.
You're 100% right, Darren. Now you have a look at Bob Geldof, where millions went missing from the account.
Yeah,
millions.
Yeah, none of it went there. And what did go siphoned off to the private industry through vaccinations, which turned out to be, anything but. And all these other little scams and tablets, and most of it goes to the big pharmaceutical companies. I mean, they all have a slice of the pie, Gordon, don't they?
Well, that's right. So I don't want to diversify or distract from going on to my main experience and expertise.
Okay.
Because I worked for Goldfields of South Africa when I left the RAF as an engineer.
Yeah.
I was recruited before I came out. I served my 12-year contract with distinction and commendation, and I decided to make a change in my life where I wouldn't be posted overseas and have to put the children in what they call it, boarding schools.
Yes.
And so then my family, 3 children, decided to make a difference. I was offered a job with the South African Air Force with 4 ranks higher than what I was in the RAF, but I didn't want to go back into a military environment, and so I joined Goldfields as a HVAC engineer and refrigeration, and worked on one of the biggest gold mines in South Africa and one of the deepest. You know, there's about 27,000 staff working at 3.5 kilometres below the collar, below the surface. Massive mine, brilliant engineering. Underground at those sort of hazardous conditions.
Indeed.
Because it's very hot, 96% humidity, 40 degrees Celsius rock temperature. So very inhospitable areas to work in, and I work with some brilliant people, absolutely brilliant. The native staff called me their brother because I worked just as hard as they did. I wasn't just sat on a box seat in my sandwiches drinking cold drink all day. I got in with the dirty stuff because that's the way I was always brought up. But I said brilliant career, and that's where I gained my expertise in dismantling fake oil, gas and mining companies by my ability with working with all the trade structures and the various processes within a mining industry, to understand that some of the people who were involved with my partner's fraud were also running fake mining companies in the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo,
Right.
and Zimbabwe. And that's where I came across the real scumbags, a guy called John Arnold Breedenkamp and a guy called Conrad Billy Rautenbach. These were the real dog vomits who work in Africa, but work complicit with the British government, because this is all about money. Absolutely. It doesn't matter who's got it. If there's anything of value, they'll have it, and they don't care who they kill or who they maim, or if there's something there that's of value to the big boys in London, they'll do it.
Indeed. And I mean, this goes back some years. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gordon, but one of the Richardsons, the gang that were around at the craze time, didn't they go over there and start mining?
Well, I said, it's not so much the mining operations. Those mines that are run by corporates like De Beers, Anglo-American, Goldfields of South Africa, and all the subsidiaries from Europe that are percentage shareholders in the big mining operations.
Yeah.
What I found out is that there are hundreds of thousands of what they call virtual companies.
Right.
And these operate incognito with the big major companies, and they set up using mining claims bought for a couple of quid.
Yeah.
They will then structure a website, and then on various stock exchanges they will use a document like in the UK called an AIM Rule 26 admission to the trade document, and that's all they need to structure a site to float shares on the alternative investment market. Now, the alternative investment market is a parallel to the London Stock Exchange for small startup companies, to allow them to be able to raise money in order to progress their companies. Now, some of the companies that I've exposed have resulted in senior directors from France being removed from their positions of power, and I include Europe's fourth most powerful woman, and thanks to me and some of my published works, which were picked up by French-Swiss investigators, a woman called Miss Anne Laveron, Europe's fourth most powerful woman, and her husband Oliver Frick were kicked off the board of directors along with others in a massive fraud which involved $2.5 billion. That's not chicken feed.
Certainly not.
Oh, and so my partner's fraud led me to that, by seeing what the common directors of the companies involved and the names of those major suspects spread an overview to myself when I started documenting and making a library up, which I have a massive library, and it's been duplicated on portable hard drives, which are held not here, but with people I don't even mention on the telephone or on the internet.
Yeah.
They're ex-military people who are watching my back, because obviously I've had threats from these people. They've bashed on my door a couple of times.
Yeah.
And issued me with legal threats, and I said lovely, because I know a bit more about court process.
Well, I don't think they'd be wanting you in front of a jewellery garden.
Pardon?
I don't think they'd be wanting to put you in front of a jewellery in a hurry. Okay, listeners, I believe that we might have been on a touchy subject there. Are you back, Gordon? Right. I'm going to have to try and phone Gordon back. We obviously hit the spot there, and we've been knocked off. So I'll just...
Hello?
Is Gordon around, please?
Speaking.
Hello,
I
Gordon.
think we upset some people.
Quite possibly. I've no doubt. They often do
Well,
this.
you know who owns Skype, don't you?
Yeah.
McAfee.
All right. Well, there we go.
It's a security system, and McAfee operates also Gmail.
Right. I see.
So they can listen into every single call. Well, I knew that way back because of these signals units that I which were linked to GCHQ.
I see.
But I've operated with that in mind. Do you understand?
Well, of course. I mean, we expect these things, Gordon, in the work we do.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's never put me off. It's actually given me great confidence that when things like this happen and they smack you and they just drop the call, they're just trying to piss me off, and it's not working.
well, as a RAF man, you would know that you only take flak when you're over the target.
Well, that's right. They said, these people throw chaff out and they think that it's going to confuse people, but when you've been working with them, it doesn't confuse me. It just makes me 100% sure I'm hurting these people where it counts.
That's
not in the pocket.
That's quite right. Now then,
Yeah.
we're still rolling, Gordon. So I think we were at the point you was telling us about how we'd gone through the connections between the special forces, the military, the private sector. We then tied that to the SAS. We touched on the Diana subject, and now we're going for the big guns, where they were taking the fourth most powerful woman in Europe. I believe we were just about there.
Well,
if you want to pick it up there, Gordon, that's great.
Yeah, well, as I said, my main expertise was to understand that the people in South Africa were working with people in the United Kingdom, very senior members of the House of Lords, MPs, and what they were doing was they were either blackmailing them or bringing them in, even working with our security services, and setting up these fake oil, gas and mining companies to be able to money launder billions, absolute hundreds of billions of pounds, and be able to bankroll corrupt politicians in Africa and elsewhere. People in the Gulf states, anywhere where money was involved, where they could be able to channel money unbeknown to the Financial Services Authority, the HMRC. All these people would have no idea of how that they could move billions offshore to the British Virgin Islands, Panama, Cyprus, all these places where our little tax authority man wouldn't be able to just jump on a bus and go and trace it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I came in. I followed these companies from South Africa, these fake mining companies, which then progressed to fake oil companies. And what I did was I started a library in about 2004, and I started to put down all the names of these companies, that these directors who stole these my partner's money, all the companies that they were operating. And then I progressed that to where I have over 1,500 fake companies.
Right.
It's a lot of paperwork.
I bet it is.
Well,
But,
and within the paperwork, there's all these members of the House of Lords who are non-executive directors, which means they're pumping a salary, sometimes 30, 40, 70,000 pound a year, 200,000 pound a year, it doesn't matter. But that money, they are complicit, they will go to jail, because those companies are fake companies. And what I've done is, using various web blogs, I've put their names out there. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And they've never taken me to court. Well, that's what I said, is that two tried to knock on my door last year, 2013, and they were represented by their legal entity, a company called Memory Crystal, who operate out of 44 Southampton buildings in London. And they operate as legal entities for, 50, 60 fake oil, gas and mining companies. And I put their names out there. And the people that threatened me was a guy called Sir Samuel Essen Jonah, a Ghanaian.
Okay.
And that guy, and he was a director with the woman in the 2.5 billion fraud with Miss Anne Laveron from France.
Should be
And that's what I say, is that once you understand what they're doing and the modus operandi, it's easy to just follow the names of the directors and watch how they have asset stripped by corporate espionage billions from Laveron was a co-director, the senior board director. And what they did was they purchased a worthless pile of junk in Namibia. And luckily I've been there in Namibia, and I knew that mine. It was a care and maintenance pile of junk, an old worked out uranium mine. And what the directors of a company called Uramin Inc., including Sir Samuel S. and Jonah, they purchased that pile of junk for $100,000, and 6 months later they sold it to their mate, Miss Anne Laveron, for $2.5 billion.
And
that's how you call it money laundering. Do you understand?
Oh, absolutely, Gordon. I mean,
no, I put all this out on a web blog, and this was picked up by Swiss-French investigators, who then contacted me and asked me for more information on the other people involved and how many other companies that they were doing it to. So I gave them that, and that's how they were contacting me quite regular, and then. That material has been handed over at this very moment in time before the French prosecutors, because it's massive. Do you understand? This is not just one set of directors. This is a whole industry that is asset stripping hundreds of billions of pounds from major corporations, including the nuclear industry.
Yeah. And
the massive corporations.
And they've been facilitated by our so-called representatives and politicians. I mean,
well, that's right.
We see in this now, in the fracking industry, it is a revolving door between councillors.
What fracking?
In the fracking industry, you see the revolving door.
What fracking? I'm telling you, what fracking? Because they can call it fracking. That's drilling for gas through shale.
Yeah.
And by pumping lubricated hydraulic fluid and water to force the gas to a certain level where they can extract it. Now, if you set up a drill rig,
yeah,
how do you know if they're drilling to the levels that they say they're drilling?
Well, exactly.
Do you understand? Because the most expensive part of any exploration is the drilling, the searching. And what they're doing is extracting the urine. Now, I can name companies. Now, I'm going to name people on the air for your Welsh listeners who will find this man extremely interesting.
Go on.
His name is Right Honourable Peter Hain.
Oh,
he's the FD for Cardiff.
Yeah.
Well, I've named him in corporate documents. He's a director of a company called Amara Mining, a non-executive director. But that's not the real name of the company, because that company is a Clough company, an old cash-gutted shell, where they ran the Ponzi scam for about 20 years without returning any cash to the investors other than the main investors, who were the ones that were stealing the money.
Yeah.
And so, our Right Honourable Peter Hain, I have CC'd him on multiple emails. That man should be inside for 25 years. Because when you know how you can move money from one company to another by way of loans, like Amara Mining is not just one company, it has multiple other subsidiaries.
Well, he's from South Africa.
Pardon?
He originates from South Africa, so he'd be well...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
from Rhodesia.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's part of the Billy, John Arnold Breeden Camp and Billy Rautenbach Brigade.
There we go.
And so I've got no fear of any listener or even Peter Hain taking me to court, because he had a letter that was delivered to him from a woman called Andrea Davison. Now, that's the one that's all over the internet, where I've been involved with this woman since 2009 up until now, with a civil case in the Royal Courts of Justice. Because I published material about massive fraud that she was operating a boiler room from in Bangor, North Wales.
Right.
And she is linked to Peter Hain and all these top politicians. And she was running a massive boiler room where she was the administrator for about 30 fake companies operating out of a little mid-terraced house.
Well, I know, and I mean, we've recently had a very tragic mining disaster in Swansea. You'll be aware of it, no doubt, Gordon.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, I watched the way Peter Hain smooched around that, and the way he avoided a public inquiry, and is still avoiding a public inquiry, by the way. I know the owner of the mine, and I've had an insight to the way this person, Peter Hain, works, and he's a naughty boy. He's a very, very devious character, let's say then.
Well, this Andrea Davison, she was raided on the 13th of the 1st, 2010, by 19 Derbyshire police, supported by the North Wales police, on instruction from documents in a Spanish boiler room operation, massive fraud network called the Georgia Brew Gang. Right. And Miss Andrea Davison was supplying the fake share certificates used in that fraud. Now, when the Derbyshire police kicked her door down, what they uncovered was a fake document factory. Now, Miss Andrea Davison is very well connected. She claims she was an ex-arms to Iraq investigator. She claims she was the intelligence advisor for the Select Committee of the Department of Trade and Industry, and she claims to have been a major Westminster paedophile ring investigator. So, unbeknown to yourself and the rest of the Welsh population, this Miss Andrea Davison has been a long-time crook, going back to early teens, when she was involved in cannabis cultivation in the drug scene in Bangor, and later on they saw her as an ideal candidate to run as part of this massive fraud network. And so in 2002 they set her up to run a fraud organisation out of a suite address in Vancouver, Canada. Now, within that same building were fake oil, gas and mining companies linked to the Toronto Stock Exchange. And so my experience then spread, not just in the UK and South Africa, it then spread to Australia and Vancouver. And then by cataloguing all the companies and their directors, what I saw was the extent of this was not just a gang of 20 or 30 people. It involves thousands of people, so you can imagine the revenue that's floating through various accounts.
Oof.
It's
huge.
Hundreds of billions.
It would be astronomical, massive. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's astronomical, but what the people made a very big mistake. They never thought somebody like myself would sit down and do the dismantlement using my mechanical and engineering experience to understand their modus operandi, that they were just running it time and time again. They never changed it because it was so successful.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done. And so anytime our Right Honourable Peter Hain wants to thinks he's going to take me to court, I love it, because then I can release documents using my bit of court experience, which will put him in jail for 25 years.
Well, yes.
And I'm waiting.
Well, there we go. Come on.
Well, one of the documents, when this Miss Andrea Davison's property was raided, about three months later, in a panic, she released a 2-page document on the internet under her website. And on that document, there were 7 header bars in blue. And I stumbled across it by accident. And from that website, using those blue header bars, I recovered over 400 pages, including personal letters from members of the House of Lords, Tony Blair, Ken Clark, Peter Hain. So, anytime that smug piece of crap wants to try and take me, then I'll be waiting. Well, because one of the documents I recovered, it's headed by missing nuclear warhead.
Wow.
So let him explain that in the House of Parliament.
Good grief.
And that's what I said to you, is that what I've been trying to do these past 10 years since we came back, is to get to people like yourself to understand that this land of honey and opportunity for the righteous and the good people who run this country is that there are far more devious, evil people sitting in number 10 Downing Street than you can ever imagine.
Well,
They are scum.
you've got me thinking, Gordon. I mean, this tragedy that happened when the mine flooded out in Gorsine, in Swansea, and they tried to pin it on the manager, who was a very professional man, and I mean, very respected in the mining industry, and apparently the plans were not correct, and the seam was opened, and of course they got flooded out. Now I'm starting to think the way Peter Hain, and I know this through speaking with people very close to the case, the way he mooched around in the background and controlled and manipulated things, makes me wonder whether he may be involved in that mine in the past, or at least the consortium or his cartel.
Well, that's what it is. You're right there, Darren. It's a cartel, and these people that he's working for are the Rothschilds.
Mm-hmm.
That's who he works for.
Yeah, because he's
believe it or not,
he's avoided. He tried to pin it on the owners and the manager, and then when the jury come back and said, "Hey, listen, there's no chance that these people could have had any foreknowledge of this," he has done his best to just cover the whole thing up. He won't allow the public inquiry. He comes out with the usual rhetoric, it'll take too much time and this, that and the other, and you just look at the guy,
it costs too much money, you see, to find out the truth.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've got a bit of truth on him, Gordon.
Oh, 100%. If you saw the document that I've got, which was recovered from Andrea Davison's website, over 400 documents I've got letters from Lord Doug Hoyle to the Chief of the Derby Police telling him to hurry up with the case and get her off. Yeah, so there's evil in this country. Never mind IS and the Taliban. They're people in the Houses of Parliament that need to be put in jail for a very long time.
Absolutely.
And if there's any of your listeners, give him a ring. I mean, you must have some constituents listening to this in Cardiff. Give Peter Hain a ring. Say, why don't you answer the emails I sent you in regard to the letter which was sent to you by Andrea Davison about the documents that you put in your constituent safe with a heading of missing nuclear warhead. I'm sure you'd like to express that in Parliament.
Oof.
There you go.
There we go. Actually, Gordon, if you wouldn't mind, sir, I'm going to play this recording to somebody who's directly affected by that disaster, and he has all the plans and everything, and with your forensic research you may be able to shine the light on that to the people of Swansea.
Well, I will try my best, because I also, as part of my work for Goldfields, I operated the flood control chamber at number 4 shaft West Driefontein for the whole of East Driefontein gold mine.
Yeah.
And so I know quite a bit about flood control and how they hit into these dolomitic areas where there are vast amount of water cavities. I mean, in South Africa it's a bit different. Those cavities can stretch for hundreds of miles. Massive chambers, which when they flood into the mine workings, the flood control chamber at West Driefontein was 9 12-stage 500 volt motor pumps. So I do know quite a bit. Not everything, obviously. I'm not blowing a trumpet, but I know enough that some of these people try to fob me off. It wouldn't work.
Well, this particular case, I mean, it stinks. The people know there's something. The people know there's something majorly wrong. I mean, the owners and the family of the people who lost loved ones. It's kind of been covered up. But I believe that there is answers there, especially with somebody of your in-depth knowledge. So we'll definitely going to take that up, and thank you for that, Gordon. But not to get
It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you, sir. Right, let's just go back on track for a moment then, because we kind of got sidelined. As important and relevant as it was, we'll just bring it back to the London, which is the epicenter of this corruption. And you've explained how that would be like the centre of the web, if you like, and it spans to South Africa. We're now in Australia.
Everywhere.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, what I did was I traced using the attorneys' dossiers, the money trail dossiers. I traced it to the accountants and auditors who set up the two companies that were involved in the major fraud in South Africa, and they were a company called Smallfield Cody & Co. Now, our attorneys, because they were on such a short time span in the United Kingdom, they were busy correlating all the documents and the forensic trail. They didn't have chance to go through it as in-depth as I did while I was in South Africa. And what I uncovered was that every single company operating out of Smallfield Cody & Co. and the two companies involved in my partners had an originating address. And that address was 788 790 Finchley Road, and it was then being controlled by the administrators of Company Directors Limited and Temple Secretaries Limited. And those people were a woman called Barbara Cahan and a guy called David Perlman, Mary Philomena Stevens, and others not so high up within the administrating ranks, but those 4 or 5 people had control, when I checked it, of over 206,000 companies, shell companies. And all those companies were then linked, when I did the research, to asset stripping the American defense budget in one fraud of $1.5 billion. Two companies set up out of that same address in Finchley Road. One was called Red Star Enterprises Limited, and the other company was called Minna Corp. And they had substructures and subsidiaries set up in Gibraltar, where they were asset stripping the American defense budget for fake fuel deliveries to the Manas Air Base in northern Afghanistan. And what they were doing was getting the clerk to sign an invoice for aviation fuel for our military jets, and those jets of the coalition forces in the American military. So what they stripped the American budget of was 1.5 billion. What they stripped ours of, I haven't had a chance to look yet. Billions.
Absolutely.
It's billions. And this is just somebody, look, I'm just one person on my own, as you understand.
Indeed.
But because I've followed and I've catalogued everything, it's because it's company's house documents, they are forensic documents, so that they can be called in a court of law for evidence that if it's any of my accusations where it has any substance, any police officer can check for accuracy as to the ability of myself to recover documents, and therefore understand how the same people can operate thousands of companies. I'm talking 250 to 500,000 companies.
Good grief.
Where billions have been silted to the British Virgin Islands, Panama, Barbados, and Cyprus, and the Channel Islands. And there's the money which can be saving our National Health Service, the police force, and all these national health, these public industries, which are our public servants. And yet, every time I've taken these documents to politicians, they shit themselves. Excuse me.
No, well,
because what I'm showing them is where politicians are members of directors of these companies, which are fake companies.
Yeah, and I mean they totally asset stripping everything. Every public utility now is going, and the health service is well, it's in the cross.
Their main objective is to privatise it.
That's right. I mean,
that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to give their mates in Parliament or their chums in the Indian business world. These companies like Tata took over Land Rover. I mean, they're talking about our industries, the car industries. There's not one owned by British.
No.
They're all foreign companies that own our companies, although they got the British name.
Yeah.
They're all controlled by foreigners.
Well, you take Tata now, you know, the steelworks here. I mean,
Yeah.
they actually get a vote as well, by the way. People that didn't know that, it was their deciding vote that got kidnapping. So just dwell
That's
on,
right.
so dwell on that. You think your vote count? You think your vote counts. I mean, Tata was the final decisive vote that got Neil Kinnock's little boy in.
Yeah, that's right. Now you have a look at Port Talbot Steelworks, and then you look at Llanwern Steelworks. I'm lucky I come from that area, you know. Those industries were all shut down because they were sold out by politicians. That's the Thatcher era.
Right.
Thatcher decided, and her cronies decided, they could make more money selling weapons than any industry could make, any proud British industry could make. They could make money killing hundreds of thousands of people by selling weapons. And that's what they did. That's why Sir Mark Thatcher was a board director of a company called BMARC, B-M-A-R-C.
Yeah.
And he was a partner with Jonathan Aitken in that company.
Didn't he try to do a coup and left his SAS buddy in jail, didn't he?
Well, that's the one I'm on about.
Yeah.
Because that's where
Yeah.
the documents that I recovered, when I was working closely with the police, there was a file on the desk, and I looked at it. Well, the guy went to the toilet, and on that file, they spotted Sir Mark Thatcher, Maggie Thatcher, and the people who stole my partner's cash. They were whining and dining, those pair of nice, right honourable conservatives, in the Carlton Hotel, in Johannesburg. These are the scum that they have the title of right honourable, like our right honourable Peter Hain. I said, is that I'm scared of nobody. I've been through a lot more in my life than a lot of people, but it's been an experience where it's given me a bit of knowledge to understand how to find the information and where to look. And once I found it, it turned my stomach as an ex-serviceman. It made me want to vomit, and I did vomit when I found out that Sir Mark Thatcher and Maggie Thatcher were being wined and dined by the people who stole over 800 victims who had families and children and lost a lot, and some lost their lives. And I said, this is the right honourable people that we've got it governing this country.
Oh, they got
But
absolutely.
then it progressed. I say, the City of London, I assure you, what I did was I worked out of that address in Finchley Road,
Yeah.
788, 790 Finchley Road, and I found that other companies with the same directors were also operating out of 26 different Finchley Road addresses and North Finchley addresses. They were all interconnected with the same group of directors. And that's what I focused on. This is why, I don't know if you've seen that, I was invited to go and speak at the steps of Trafalgar Square. Did you see that one?
I seen bits of it, Gordon, but for the listeners who may not have, can you give them an outline of what happened there? Because you done a bit of damage that day.
Well, on the 1st or the 3rd, St. David's Day, is that I was invited to go down by a guy called Mitchell Anthony. He runs a group called Aspire, and they invited me to give to address the people on Trafalgar Square steps about corruption in the City of London. And thereafter, after about 40 minutes, we walked from there to the BBC headquarters. But the BBC were well warned because the riot police were there, the barricades were up, and it was a long walk for an old, rather stout gentleman like myself. They never put that warning on when he said, give up smoking, I can assure you.